Hi folks, it's Ian Part-Time Experience. Let's talk about dialogue. We talked about writing and how to improve your storytelling in the past, and I wanted to revisit that with focusing more on dialogue. As such, I reached out to a few different devs and members of the RPG Maker community in general to get their feedback on what inspired them and helped them with their dialogue, or what advice that they would have to pass on to others. Using what they shared is what helped me write the script for this DevTalk, so shout out to them. Oh, and if you don't like and subscribe, then you will be stuck in writing hell. Sorry, I don't make the rules. So, in books, you primarily see very descriptive language for setting the scene. The words describing the autumn air, the motions of the leaves as they change, stuff like that. However, you don't get that in movies, or TV shows, or video games. In those, you focus primarily on dialogue while the scene is set by the visuals you provide alongside them. Even better, dialogue does not follow the same rules as descriptive terms and such, because there are no grammar rules for dialogue. Well, there are some rules, but it's more suggestive and it's based upon how the individual speaks. A consistent piece of advice that was given was the idea of keeping things brief. Always make sure to convey the reason of the conversation quickly and in as few screens as possible to prevent characters from rambling. And, from a design perspective, multiple text boxes can cause unnatural breaks in your dialogue, where sentences or words are incomplete, thus causing the natural flow of reading to stumble. Because of this, you need to make sure your dialogue is good and interesting. Otherwise, folks will be bored with it, misconstrue what is said, or worse, just skip it. So, how do we make dialogue more interesting? Well, with quirks. No, not like My Hero, you subliterate nerds. Quirks in regards to giving characters specific speech patterns. I made the joke on one stream about reading one character's lines as if I was William Shatner, throwing in awkward pauses that made no sense. Dropping a letter or two in a character's dialogue is a common method many use. However, overusing these quirks can become tiresome, like the stereotypical pirate speak of yars and thars and such. If used sparingly, it's a little endearing, but it rides a thin line of being cringy and can possibly annoy your audience. Everyone loves a good witty one-liner, but if you have too many of them, it makes the dialogue feel more like fluff than substance. And if you don't give the NPC something meaningful to say, then it can also feel like it's lacking substance there as well. Imagine every NPC you come across just has one or two lines about the weather. You'd stop wanting to talk to the NPCs. Giving random NPCs a throwaway line is fine, but at least make it grounded in the world that they are in. Like one NPC saying, "I'm willing to bet the mayor and their secretary are having an affair." And then another NPC somewhere else saying, "I think I saw the mayor in his office last night with someone." It adds a bit of interest while still not being plot relevant. It adds more of a lived-in feeling, so that way it feels like there's actually more going on, it's just not important. Exposition can be a tricky one to navigate, as there are times for story reasons you need to explain things to a player. But going into a very long-winded moment will bore the players. Some older RPGs make this mistake, where they have 20-minute, or longer, cutscenes that is nothing but characters yapping more than a pack of chihuahuas. Hell, in some cases, I've had the time to step away from the game, leisurely go make a sandwich, eat it, take a piss, come back, and the cutscene is still going. For your main cast of characters, try considering the character themselves. As we grow, we change due to the events we experience. So naturally, dialogue should also evolve through the story, where a character alters how they speak based upon the events that they have experienced. And keep in mind that depending on who the character is speaking to, they may change how they speak from there as well, either out of endearment, respect, or just flat-out hatred of the other person. Joey Wheeler, from that silly show about a children's card game, is an example of this. There is often a joke about how he is not book smart and is often has a bit of disrespectful tone towards people. As such, his speaking is often with a thick Brooklyn accent of saying stuff like, "Hey, Yugs, if you had, then you had. You gotta believe in the heart of the gods." Early on, he wants to fight everyone, and it's reflected in how he talks. Though, when he talks to his sister, his language softens and is much less confrontational. On the counter side, when he talks to Kaiba, he kicks up the antagonistic parts of his dialogue. As the show progresses, he speaks a bit better with those he's adventured with and trusts more, or respects more. Speaking of the stranger parts of New York and those who reside there, dialects. As mentioned with dropping of letters, there's also alternative spellings of words to better show that the character may not have full grasp on the language they speak. They can even substitute in words from another language that they are more familiar with or is perhaps their native language. Final Fantasy XII does a good example of this in the area known as Bujerban, where they use some words from the Sanskrit language. You often speak to individuals who will replace a word with another one. I may butcher the pronunciation of these words, but let's go with a couple examples. Why can our civilian craft not fly just because the Empire says so, Badra? I've filed an official complaint, but I fear nothing will come of it. Badra means brother or friend, and it's very often used by the Bajurban when speaking to the main cast. The guards will often start their sentences with Svagatam. Again, apologies if I'm butchering these words, which means welcome or greetings. This is also shown in newer games like Baldur's Gate 3 with Lae'zel, often mashing in words from her native tongue or butchering the pronunciation of other words. Another thing to consider is translation or localization. If your game is going to be made into multiple languages, then you have to remember that idioms and slang often do not translate. Ted Woosley is a good example of someone who had some good, but also some really bad translations, such as having Kefka in Final Fantasy VI saying, "Son of a Submariner, they'll pay for this," or in Final Fantasy IV, where Tella says, "You spoony bard!" For moments like these, you would not want a translation of the idiom, but rather a localization to the language that you are going into, and find something that's closer there as to what is being said. For instance, I remember talking to the dev of the Seventh Warrior, where we spoke at a good length about translations and localizations. There's one phrase in German that is, "Wem sagst du das?" as it means, "Who do you tell?" However, in English, we don't really say that. Instead, we would use a sarcastic tone of saying, "Oh, you don't say," or "Oh, I have noticed," or "Oh, I haven't noticed." Anywho, that's all I wanted to have to say about this, so I hope you enjoyed, and be sure to stick around for future videos.